Hey, everybody from Facebook, Jay Sekulow here, and this is, we're in a radio studio, but this is something a little bit different, so we're glad you're tuning in with us. We're going to be talking about an event that I'm going to be participating in just in February, but before we do that, let me introduce you Claude Thomas, who is the president and leader of C3 Global, and then an old friend of mine, not old, but we've been friends a long time, Denny Brewer, who's a great lawyer and a good friend of mine, and we've worked together for 250 years. So it's great to have both of you in our studio. We're going to talk about the conference, but we wanted to welcome our audience that's watching via Facebook and those that are watching via video. Welcome to our studios. I have to say it looks a lot cleaner now that we have guests coming in. Everything got cleaned up. So, but it's great. Thanks for coming. So let's talk about the conference.
Yes, Jay, we're very excited that you're going to be one of our speakers at our conference in February. The conference is a leadership conference. And it's focused on senior leaders in the churches, and we're looking for about 4,000 to participate in the conference, and focus on leadership, which is an important element of what all of our Christian leaders are doing. And
you've had the conferences. This is not the first time.
No, we've been this conference. How long, Benny?
Over 10 years.
10 years.
Yeah, so, very good.
And it's a well-known conference, and we have people from across the United States, and literally internationally, we have people come. So
the idea is it mostly pastors or church leaders or business leaders? Give me the kind of that.
It's a mixture of all, because it focuses on such great leadership principles. As we know, leadership principles transfer from church leadership to business or whatever, and so it's a leadership conference. And so we'll have business leaders from across the Metroplex, and we have business leaders that come with their churches. Interestingly enough, pastors will bring lay leaders out of their church who are leaders in the community, and they participate and take the leadership principles and right back into their work.
Great. Denny, as a lawyer, what do you find the value of this? And then I'm going to let you all ask me questions.
Well, Jay, what I love about it, we get down to nuts and bolts, best practices.
Right.
And there's so much misinformation out there, especially these days, I think. Yep. So what I love about our conference is that we actually we support the conference throughout the year. Yep. Claude travels all over the country holding webinars, roundtables, and we're trying to equip the pastors, equip the church, equip the lay leaders so that they can get about the business of doing church and get the back office in shape, if you will.
Yep.
and to take care of all those things now that a church needs to be concerned with. Where legal overlaps with our church world.
Sure. Well, I mean, look, you were hitting elections. We're already I'm going to say we're hitting the election cycle. We're in the election cycle right now. So things are heating up. And we're having to, look, we have to make decisions on radio every day. What call we're going to take, what call we're not going to take. We had a bite today we're going to play. I could play a few minutes of the sound bite, but then I had to cut it off at a certain point because it looked like it'd be opposing a candidate. So I'm dealing with this with the Hillary Clinton thing on Thursday. We're going to cover the Benghazi hearings, but you got to be careful as a C3 organization what you can and cannot do. So, anyways, you're our guest, but it's your conference, so fire away.
Well, let me say, Jay, thank you for having us. Denny and I are both very excited about being here with you, and we're very appreciative of what you do.
Thanks.
And the work that you do in behalf of all of us.
Oh, thank you.
So we're very grateful for that. I think that one of the things, when we talk about leadership has to have good information to make good decisions.
Right.
And when it comes to this election cycle, for example, there's a lot of question in the evangelical world, and we've sort of backed off out of fear, maybe that we're going to violate something or be called into question about something. So. Can you? Can you speak to that?
Sure, we get those calls. We get that call comes in here all the time, and we get the call of what the pastor can and cannot say. Let me tell you where the line. It's actually a pretty bright line, and that is, and Denny would know this as a lawyer. You can't endorse or oppose a candidate for public office, so you can't say don't vote for so and so or vote for so and so. But that's it. You can address every single issue, everything about what's going on in the culture. You could have an election sermon on the importance of voting. You can have an election sermon on the importance of voting from a biblical worldview. I mean, all of that's appropriate. There's none of that's a violation of the law. Where the line gets we're difficult is if you start endorsing or opposing candidates for public office. I mean, I know Jack Graham, friend of ours, had a presidential forum this past week. I'm going up to Regent University, which is a university, but it's a C3 organization, on Thursday, and we're hosting Jeb Bush. So, I mean, you do these things, and you do these in a proper way. But you get the line where churches have to be really careful. And, I mean, there's been other legal groups that have been kind of encouraging pastors to breach the line, and I'm not doing that. I don't encourage people to break the code, although I think the law itself is unconstitutional. I think this idea that you could tell a church what they can, if a pastor wanted to say vote for so-and-so because here's why I think you should, I think they should have the right to do it. Most pastors would not do that, is the reality. But I think once you stay clear of endorsing or opposing a candidate for public office, you can hit every issue, talk about all the things that matter to the church, and to the family.
So you think you would encourage, according to what the pastor or leader would want to do, to talk about things such as right to life?
Sure. I mean, look. I mean, how do you avoid the life issue right now when you've got I was in federal court on Friday in San Francisco on the videos. I mean, I'm representing one of the board members of the videographer, the investigative journalist. I mean, we were in court on that. I'm having to talk. I'm talking about it on radio. You can't not talk. How are you not going to talk about the Middle East when the Middle East, Israel's in unbelievable stress right now, and Christians are being persecuted in the Middle East in numbers we've never seen before? I don't think you can ignore that. You can't ignore that. And I think churches have an obligation. Sure. Are those political issues as well? Yes, because candidates have positions on all these things. Yes. But you certainly have the right to engage them.
So the rule is just very simple. As you said, it's a bright line.
Yep.
As long as the pastor doesn't say, I'm endorsing Jay Sekulow for X office, or
you won't have to worry about that. But if I was, and I'm not, you're right. You wouldn't say I'm endorsing so-and-so. At least not in the capacity as the pastor of the church in front of a church audience.
Okay.
But if a pastor, go ahead.
Privately,
sure.
If you're in a group of people,
absolutely,
you can
First Amendment rights apply.
You can speak to your convictions and who
you're
supporting.
You're at an event, you're at a dinner, you're at a reception, and someone asks you, and there happen to be church members there. Sure, you can. You're not as the church.
I see.
Not as the private citizen, absolutely.
Yeah. When you come to the conference, it's going to be, I'm sure that we're going to talk about more of these important issues that are a little more complicated.
Yeah.
Let me ask about another one that Denny and I were talking about, is the Affordable Care Act.
Yeah.
What are some of the sticky places for churches in the Affordable Care Act? Are there sticky places?
We've got this case, the Little Sisters of the Poor. So we won the case at the Supreme Court involving Hobby Lobby.
Yes.
So you didn't have the mandatory abortion coverage.
Yeah.
But the Obama administration is going after the Little Sisters of the Poor, which is a religious charity. It's a Catholic.
Right.
I mean, they help people in need and mostly elderly. And I mean, you would think this would be the last group they pick on, but it's not the last group they picked on. This is the group they picked on. So in that particular case, which is I think the court's going to hear it. We're working on briefs now. The issue is, can nonprofits, which should be a no-brainer, opt out or at least not have to give that kind of what they call it comprehensive health care, which includes reproductive services, which is code name for abortion.
Yeah.
And churches that have a pro-life position should not be compelled to violate their conscience by providing abortion coverage. So I think we have the right, as the church, as a nonprofit, as whatever organization is, to say no to that. Certainly, if Hobby Lobby was protected, the church should be protected. But what happened was they did a little switch. I mean, the typical, the administration here, what they do is they'll switch a regulation. And the regulation switch was, well, if you'll sign these papers, we'll give you this exemption. Well, they didn't want to sign the paper either. I mean, they just wanted to not be involved in the process. So, look, I think the court's going to hear it. I think the Little Sisters are going to win. Look, I take the side of the Little Sisters any day over the government. Over Big Brother or the Little Sisters, I'll take the Little Sisters here. So, look, I think it's going to be an issue. I don't know how it plays politically. I don't know if it's going to be at the forefront or whatever. But, the Affordable Care Act's been in business for 5 years. It's been pretty tough on most people. I mean, it hasn't helped with access to health care. I mean, it's been a disaster. I mean, look what that. What's it today? They changed the rules and regulations on exams for women. I mean, for breast cancer. I mean, that is Obamacare. I mean, that kind of stuff makes no sense.
It's a moving target.
Yeah, I think it is a moving target because it's law by regulation. Denny can relate to that. They regulate you to death so that what happens is the law can say one thing or not say anything, and then they come in with these 4,000 regulations that change everything. And so I call them unelected bureaucrats really running the country, which is exactly what's happening.
Yeah.
Hey, Can I jump into something because we have limited time here, and we're gonna go into a lot more detail at the conference.
Let's tell everybody when the conference is February 10th and 11th next year. And what's the best website?
Go to the My C3. They can either do two things. C3 Conference 216. That's a website. Okay. The other website would be My C3 Global, which is our website, or they can go to Fellowship Church.
Okay, so you got multiple places.
So any of the three, but C3 Conference is the simplest and the easiest. Okay. C3 Conference 216.
Yeah.
And Jay, I heard a rumor you're going to bring a band with you.
Well, you know, we if we played as good as we did last night,
So you were hot last night.
We had a good night last night, and that was so what happened was we were doing it every 2 weeks. We were doing this live hour on Facebook, and we just tried it as a kind of an experiment to see what happened. It was 30,000 people. Wow. I mean, actually, I think the first one was 44,000 people. I mean, it was.
So I heard your plan was to take them in before the Supreme Court the next time.
Yeah, next time my warm-up act. And so we did it. So we played a couple weeks in a row, and I told the guys, so we got to have a bit broader set. I mean, you can't keep playing the same 10, 12 songs every time. So these are really great music. I mean, it's the lead singer of Kansas, John Elefante. Lead singer of Petra, John Schlitt. Lead guitarist for DC Talk.
Really?
Yeah. So, I mean, these are just great musicians. And then the rest of us average Joes. And we're fine. But they're great. So,
man, you're good.
Yeah. So we did, last night, actually, it was funny. We did last night, we did a whole new set. Had about 32,000 people, I think, watched it. And we did some pretty complicated, for people that are my age will remember bands like Boston and Styx. Oh, yeah. It's pretty complicated stuff. And, boy, we hit it. We nailed it yesterday, and we had a good. So I swapped drums and guitar depending on the song, and then one of our other guys is a drummer or a guitarist depending on the song. So I hope we bring the band. We had a blast. I was at an event last week, and they had asked me, said, "Well, I wish we could have brought the band. We should have. It would have.
Well, the rumor is it's at the church and among the C3 Global pastors. That you're coming and you're in the band. The
band needs to come.
You're going to take it over.
Yeah. Well, I will tell you, we'll have a blast. I mean, we play some Christian. Obviously, these guys were in Christian bands too, so we play some Christian music. All the music's clean and good, but it's the classic stuff. And the reaction is, we had yesterday 1,900 comments during that hour. I mean, think about that a moment. And 1,900. Of which I read probably most of them last night. And everybody was very pumped. One woman said that she hadn't heard this particular song in probably 35 years. Probably true. But we had a great time. So awesome. The boys in the band will come, and we'll rock the Fellowship Church out.
Excellent. So we'll do the legal deal. We'll do all that, and then we'll enjoy it.
Yeah, because the thing is, I mean, one of the things that actually we're looking at doing, because this is kind of how do you reach people in where they're at. And one of the things we're looking at doing actually is we have some classic songs we cover, some of the kind of the classic rock stuff, and then we have had 4 original songs. So we mix those in, and those songs tell a real story. All the songs have a story. I mean, you got like a song like from Styx, "Fooling Yourself," which the lines in "Fooling Yourself" are great. I mean, it's like you're reading the newspaper today. And then we wrote a song called "Where I Stand," which was about the persecuted church. So all these issues. We've got a song called a real rocker called "Undemocratic." And it's about all the stuff going on in Washington right now. So it all ties in, and then I talk in between. We're looking at doing that, but it'll be great. We're looking forward to it. So if you want to come see everybody's been asking me, when can I see the band live? That will probably be, I believe, the first time that the band, live on Facebook, of course, we're live, but other than just watching us on a single camera, a single phone, you'll be able to see us on February 10th or 11th.
Yeah. Up close and personal. February 10 and 11.
So if you're anywhere in the area, you should register for this event. And if you're not in the area, you should come in and see it, because it'll be it will be the first live appearance other than via video Facebook that the Jay Sekulow Band's going to make. So it'll be the debut.
And all the people from Franklin can come.
We can come from all over. Hey, I was in Washington State, big event, about 2,000 people. This was just this week. And I was actually talking on international affairs, but they had a reception before, and I was doing the picture things. I would say 50% of the people in the line for the picture said, "I really love what the ACLJ's doing, but I really love your band." So, hey, there you go. What are you going to do? So you do these things to reach as broad of audience as we can.
Well, Jay, let me ask you a question about. There was a zoning case that the Supreme Court
Gilbert
heard
versus Arizona.
Yes.
Yeah, good case.
And I know this is
kind of the highlight of the term, actually, because it was a pretty dismal term. Yeah.
So can you talk to us a little about?
Well, it was a case that a friend of mine argued, Dave Cortman. it was a case that, I mean, was not getting a lot of attention. It was a sign ordinance, which everybody has. And the sign ordinance is, yeah, you do. And churches were, so what they do is, church can put up the temporary sign, has to be this particular size, but only for this amount of days. And then you got these political signs that are, 20 feet by 20 feet, and they're up for 4 months.
Yeah.
So they were segregating out the churches from all these other groups. And the argument was, we filed a brief in the case, actually with Emory University School of Law. We did a brief with their law clinic. And the brief that we said in the brief was, that is classic content-based discrimination. In other words, the idea that you're targeting out the religious speaker. All they had on the sign was the name of the church, the website, and a Bible verse. And by the way, the website, of course, had all their Christian mission statement on this. So it was classic content-based discrimination. And the good news is, as in most of these cases, I've been arguing these for a long time, it was unanimous. There wasn't one justice that said no. The interesting dynamic on that is and what we'll see, you never know until these things kind of play out over a couple of years, does it change the content-based rules? Because this idea that you could, I had this with a case called Lamb's Chapel years ago, where they said, we allow everybody that you can imagine to use school facilities, except churches, because they're religious advocacy. And then the state of New York said religious advocacy only serves the advantage of adherence to that particular faith and is of no advantage to anybody else, which is absurd. And, and 9 justices said it was absurd. But Justice Scalia had this great line during the argument. He said, you put in your brief that, religious advocacy only serves the benefit of the adherence of that particular faith. He said to the lawyer for the others for the state of New York, said, is that the position in New York still? Oh, yeah, it is. He said, well, do they still give tax exemptions for real property taxes in New York for churches? Yeah, they do. And there's a reason they do that, right? He didn't want to answer that, which was what the church gives to the community outweighs the taxes. And then he said, it used to be thought that a religious person was less likely to mug me or rape my sister. And then he said, how's the new regime doing?
Wow.
Yeah, powerful. And wow. It was one of those moments when you come up for rebuttal and you really don't want to say anything. It's like,
yeah.
So this anti-religious bias that was in these zoning rules or are in the Affordable Care Act, I think are being struck. I mean, we've been doing this for 30 years. I mean, we've been litigating these cases for 30 years. So the law has developed nicely. You're always nervous, though. The next president probably selects 2 justices of the Supreme Court, and that'll be the Supreme Court for the rest of our lives.
Yeah.
I mean, probably. Yeah, the majority of the court for the rest of our lives. So the next election's got a huge.
And so that would be something for a pastor to remind his people of.
Oh yeah, and you could say, look, judges matter. Now, you nominate a judge to the Supreme Court. One thing we've learned over the last 50 years, it doesn't guarantee any result.
Yeah.
Someone asked me, one of the candidates asked me the other day, should we have litmus tests? This particular case said, I have no litmus tests. I said, we need litmus tests. They have litmus tests. The left has litmus tests. So we need litmus tests. How do you view life? How do you view church-state relations? How do you view the relationship of free speech?
Freedom of religion.
Freedom of religion, free exercise of religion. How do you view this? So I think that is certainly something that and I'll get into that at the conference. I think it's going to be a big election issue. Now, with the Middle East exploding, I think that's going to probably be the dominant one. But it'll depend on all these issues will be discussed. But again, pastors have the right to discuss these issues.
But Jay, one of the things I think would be of great interest to the people at the conference is what's happening around the planet, around the globe, in the persecution of Christians.
Well, it's
and our anti-Jewish sentiments, it's rising up. Anti-Semitism, anti-Christianity. They seem to be 2 parallel tracks going in the same direction. I think it would be interesting because your practice not only here in the States, internationally, what would be your take on that? Would be one of the things I think we'd.
Yeah. Well, and what we can do locally.
Yeah. Well, look, the persecution issue right now is, basically there's 9/11 in the Middle East every day. Look at that. If you look at the numbers, there's thousands being killed every day. And you read about the ISIS killing 185 of this, 12 missionaries, kids. The beheadings, I wrote a book about ISIS before ISIS was as known as they were. This is a huge issue. It's a huge issue for the United States. It's a huge issue for the international community. Unfortunately, we in the United States, and I talk about our leadership, has not taken the issue as seriously as they need to. First of all, ISIS is not the JV squad. We've learned that. We now have, cut a deal with Iran, so the Russians are now back in the Middle East. They have not been engaged in the Middle East since the 1980s. So 25 years of no Russian involvement in the Middle East. It's like we've returned the clock back to the Middle East, 1973, where you've got this proxy. Basically it is a proxy war right now between us and them, except they're winning. The Iranians are there. The Russians are there. Hezbollah's there. Cuba has got troops over there. In the United States, I don't know what we're doing over there.
Not much.
Yeah, not much. And Christian persecution is very, very significant. I mean, this is. I mean, I've got the case of the pastor in Iran. I mean, Saeed Abedini's, but there's, he's one of thousands. I mean, it's a horrible situation made worse, really made worse by the fact that we have to wake the church up to the reality of what's going on. Because in the United States, we don't have religious persecution. You got acts of discrimination, but you don't have religious persecution.
No, and really the people who are involved in that, like in Iran, there's such a strong Christian movement in the underground in Iran.
Yep.
And yet, we here, we don't even know about that. A whole lot of the Christian
the United States had the moment. I mean, look, where was the first Arab uprising? It was in Tehran.
Right.
1 million people, mostly young people, mostly students, in the streets. What did the administration do? They said, back down, stand down, basically. Yeah. Tahrir Square in Egypt, millions of people on the street, mostly Muslim Brotherhood. Yeah. What did we say? We back them, get rid of Mubarak, who was our ally. Yeah. And then you ended up with Mohammed Morsi, the head of Egypt for a season, was the head of the Muslim Brotherhood. Now, the Egyptian people reacted to that and got rid of it. But this is not the way it's supposed to be. So foreign policy really matters. And experience in dealing with foreign policy really matters.
And then the big question, I think, for us at the conference would be that you could give us some insight into and really help pastors, because pastors, by and large, I think, are so involved in what they're doing locally in their church and just trying to move the ball down the court in their own church, that many times that they miss the bigger picture and don't understand the relationship of what's happening in the Middle East to Israel, for example, and the role of Israel, and how policy that we have here in America does affect everything.
You look at the anti-Semitic attitude, and there's even an anti-Israel bias developing within the evangelical church, especially with younger evangelicals. And when I tell these younger evangelicals that are in their 20s, early 30s, and then when they have this anti-Israel bias, I said, look at the UN. The United Nations condemns last week the death of the Palestinians that were killed in Iran and in Israel, in the West Bank. They never put in there that those people that were killed were the terrorists that were killing Jews, stabbing Jews, shooting Jews, shot a husband and a wife in their car in front of their 4 children. But the UN Secretary General, Ban Ki-moon, he says, he mourns the death of the Palestinians. Now, I don't like it when innocents get harmed, but look, when you've got a conflict, it's going to happen. I mean, it's horrible, but it's going to happen. It happened to this guy from Eritrea that was in Israel. I mean, people thought he was one of the terrorists because there was a shooting and stabbing going on at a bus station. People need talk to the Christians in the West Bank.
Right, exactly.
Talk to the Christians in Gaza and see if they'd rather be run by Hamas or the state of Israel.
I even talk to the Palestinian Christians
That's what I'm saying.
Yes,
of course.
Talk to them about who they.
Yeah, no question. They don't want to be under Hamas because they know they'd be done because it's the belief of a caliphate. Yeah, that's what it is. And the only reason Iran's mad at ISIS, besides the Sunni Shia thing, is ISIS declared the caliphate first.
Jay, it's so exciting to sit here and talk to you about these things because obviously your expertise in it and the breadth of your knowledge in it. And we're very excited and very thrilled that you're going to be at the conference.
So let's talk about the conference for a minute if we can. The conference is February 10th and 11th. Registration is best at C3 Conference.
Yeah, go to either C3 Conference, and if those who are actually, they can go to a site and just use your name and get a discount just by, I mean, here you are, you're helping your audience. You're giving back to them, Jay.
I'll tell you what. Also, see, when you come to this, because we'll bring the band. We'll have a CD for our. If you say you came because of this, well, at the conference we will get you a CD. Nice. There we go. How about that?
How good is that?
I think it's pretty good.
I think it's great. Yeah.
So, anyways, let's talk about a little bit about the conference. Give me a little bit more about the conference. So, other than me, you're gonna have a lot of people there. Who's going to be speaking?
One of the people that in the Metroplex, particularly, we're excited about. Troy Aikman, Ed's going to interview Troy. So
great.
We'll have the law and justice on one side, and you're not a big sports fan, are you, Jay?
I am a big sports fan. Just my teams have not done particularly well.
Memorabilia around.
Yeah. So
I was just looking around.
I'm a conflicted guy right now because I've got the Cubs, and I lived in Chicago as a kid, and the Mets, and I lived in New York as a kid. I was a Met fan, and I was a Cub fan, so I'm really conflicted. Although it looks like the Mets right now are 2 games up, so we'll see.
Yeah, they're doing well. They're doing well.
Football's not been so good around this part of the country the last.
Well, we're feeling the
couple
pain
weeks.
a little bit in our pros in Dallas.
What's your college team?
Mine?
Yeah.
Tennessee Volunteers.
Well, you haven't had. I mean, you've had worse seasons. Not great.
No,
Danny?
we're coming
missing
back.
you, and it's been tough.
Well, okay.
We're still trying to get over the death penalty, but that's a whole other conversation.
Vanderbilt Doors, not a good year.
No, not a good year.
Tough year.
Now, I did send 2 daughters down to Baylor, so I've adopted them right now.
Are they okay?
Well,
Baylor's doing
they're
all right?
doing good. They're doing well.
Aaron's a Georgia Tech fan. I don't know how they're Texas.
Okay.
You know, Georgia. I'm friends with Coach Rick, and they've had a rough time. I mean, SEC's had it to been. Anyways, I won't talk SEC football at the conference.
We were beating each other up in the SEC.
Yeah, Ed's no Florida State guy, so he played a little basketball there, too.
I've got a law partner that's a Seminole. That's a Knoll. Okay, yeah. Are they doing all right this year?
I think they're doing
okay.
good.
Now you think you're watching ESPN?
Yeah, they're doing great. But anyway, Troy's going to be there, and then Levi Lusko, he's up in the Northwest.
Yeah.
He's got a great church, a great young man who has a lot of influence and leadership. He's going to be one of our speakers. Bill Cornelius, who is on our board at C3 Global, and one of our C3 Global guys from down in Corpus, great leader, has a great church. He's going to be one of our speakers. Then Ed's going to be kicking it off, and it's always a real exciting and interesting experience.
So how does the day go for folks? I mean, what's the day like?
Okay, well, we'll kick off in the morning time with a service and everybody together, and then we do breakouts. The breakouts we call them app sessions.
Yep.
They're very, very practical. They drill down with leadership principles, and they run the gamut from everything from children's ministry to outreach and what you do in the legal field, how you protect your church. And so the app sessions are very practical, and that's for the team. Right. All the way across the board. And so with the app sessions in the afternoon, then we come back in the evening, and we have another gathering everybody in the evening. And so that's both days, and we'll start Wednesday morning, and we'll finish Thursday evening.
Great.
It's going to be a great conference. We've already laid out the app sessions, and people go online, they can actually see what those app sessions are.
Okay, so the schedule's there. I'm actually looking at the website right now, c3conference.com.
Yep.
So if I go to what to expect, that's what you would do.
That's it.
You'd have a whole breakdown of the application sessions and
speakers.
Yeah, this is great.
It's a lot of fun, Joe.
It's going to be great. Looking forward to it. Yeah, that'll be a great event. So let me encourage folks again to go to the website. c3conference.com is the best place to go.
They can get it all right there. And actually, they can register.
We could stream it from Facebook when we're there, or at least part of it.
No doubt about it. No doubt about it. And the other thing is, if they go to myc3global.com and register for the conference there on C3 Global, my C3 Global, and just put your name in,
you give them a discount.
They give that discount.
See,
and then they show up, and you give them a CD.
Yeah, and we're going to give them a CD when they come. I'm looking at Aaron while he does that because he'll get it together. But we'll do that. We're looking forward to it. Again, the dates are very important here. February 10th and 11th. So people come in the night before, and does it end the night of the 11th?
It ends the night of the 11th, Thursday night.
All right. So it's a great way to engage. I'm looking forward to being with all these great leaders.
It's easy to get to. We're near. We're within 10 minutes of the airport.
I was just in Dallas on Saturday. I'm going back on Tuesday for an event, and it's a great place to go, and it's a good time of year, and a little warmer in Dallas than it will be in Nashville or New York or certainly in Washington.
In February.
Yeah, in February, so that'll be great.
Yeah.
Anything else we need to cover?
Well, we could talk about a lot of things. We could talk about access to schools and student ministries. The
student ministry issue is interesting because there was one case that was not so great at the Supreme Court a couple of years ago, that Martinez case, and but we've been able to kind of cabinet. So students are getting access. I will tell you, I was at an event in New York, actually in my hometown on Long Island was the event, so it worked out great. And it was the pastor of the church we represented in 1992. He wasn't the pastor then, but the church was still in existence. And they were the ones, the Lamb Chapel's case, that was the one that started it in the church. And the church and the school, and of course from that, you've got churches in schools all over the country. It's been a great.
Yeah, right, we've done it.
Yeah, it's a great for planning churches, right?
Yeah, we have a lot of churches
startups.
A lot of
fantastic.
It gives you a great venue. People know it. It's good for the community. It's good for the school. It's good for the church. That's been successful. Of course, the Bible clubs and all that have been, pretty much no problem.
What if a student minister gets rejected at a school? How does he handle that?
Tough right now because of the security situation. The old days of just, the youth pastor in the community walks onto the school and has lunch with the students. Those days are pretty much over. And look, the school has to know who's there. Now, if they're letting other community interest groups in, they should let the pastors in too.
Yes.
But if they're saying, we're not letting anybody in unless it's a parent of the kid or the legal guardian, you got to respect that too. So that has changed, just the nature of security on campus. But in some schools, they're fine with it. But, work with the school system. It's not a lawsuit. It's working with the school system.
Yeah. So it's actually sitting down with the leadership of the school system.
Here's what I'd like to do. But, look, they may want a background. I'm sure they're going to want a background check.
They're
going to want. You can't blame them. They have to.
And they should.
Yeah. So that's what. It's not the old days in that regard.
And so
working with the schools is really critical.
Student minister can't get all upset about it.
I'm not going to court over it. If Denny called me and said we've got a student minister at church and they're not letting him on the campus and so and they're not letting anybody, no. Those aren't cases.
Yeah.
Not anymore.
So the student pastors, they got to roll their sleeves up,
and
establish
the system,
relationships, and I'll tell you, our guys at Fellowship Church,
they've done
an awesome job.
But that's because
it takes work.
Yeah, because that's leadership. So they're working on community relations, and it's not just a one-off. And if it's a one-off, it's much more problematic. If you build a relationship with the local school, with the school board, they know who you are willing to let them know who you are, that tends to solve the problem. It's not a federal lawsuit. It is a relationship build. It's a leadership principle.
Jay, one of the things at the conference that I think that is would be so critical, and you could lend such strength to, is that pastors need to lead their congregations to be involved in the process.
Yep.
And because if we don't like the way things are going, or if there's something we feel like needs to be done, we need to be involved in the process.
Right.
And Denny, don't you think it would be great if we had some guidelines and just very practical, bottom shelf, on the lower shelf where the cookies are, that these guys, because we like to talk about things being simple, getting it real, getting it raw, so that a guy walks away, he's got some handles to hold on to, some rails to run on, and he's got something. So I think that would
absolutely I think it's very important to talk about that, and I think you have to, when you do that, you're really getting down to how do you engage the community.
That's it.
And that's a relationship build. And that, the conference has a lot about leadership. These are basic leadership principles. Sometimes it's, you do things by litigation, sometimes by arbitration, sometimes it's just community relations. Yeah. A lot of what the church needs to be doing is community relations, not so much on the lawsuits. We have them, we'll do it, but, the
lawsuits get the headlines.
Yeah, you had that situation like with the clerk of the court up in Kentucky.
Right.
My view was, and this is not popular necessarily with conservatives, but if you're an elected official and the Supreme Court's made a decision, you may really dislike the decision and it may violate your conscience, then quit.
Yeah.
Now, I think they could have accommodated her easier than they did and they kind of created a federal case out of it. But the reality is, you're an elected official, the Supreme Court issues a decision. You can't pick and choose which laws you're going to enforce. That's just not the way it works. So being strategic in the engagement process is absolutely critical. You have to be strategic.
And you'll talk about that at the conference.
Sure, absolutely. And how to strategically engage and when to move forward and when to pull back.
Yeah. And I think that's the kind of thing that we try to do at the conference.
Yeah.
There's the hot buttons that get the attention and put the balloons in the air. But then there are those things that really make the difference when it comes to working it out.
Right.
And so I think that would be a big deal for us at the conference.
No, Jay, can you touch on prayer? Because it seems that there's some confusion out there, I think, as to obviously in church it's not a problem, but when you get outside.
You've got the coach in Washington State right now. It's getting a lot of headlines. So here's the thing. If it's student-led, student-initiated, students have the right to pray on campus, period. We argued that in 1989. It's still the law of the land, 26 years later. So students have the right to pray on their public school campus without a problem. The difficulty becomes when there's involvement of school officials. So in the situation with the coach, I would argue that it's after school. It's after the sporting event. He's just participating with the students and not leading it. Now, I'm not going to tell you it's an easy case. I'm glad my friends at the Liberty Council are handling it. But these aren't easy cases. These are more complex. Whenever you have a school official involved, it's more complex. That's just the way it is.
It compounds it, no matter what the Woodlawn movie says.
Exactly. Student-led, student-initiated, easy.
Yeah.
School involvement of school officials, not so much. I had a case out of Texas on that. It didn't work out too good. That was one of the ones you don't have in my introduction when people introduce me. They always introduce you, one this case, you won that. They don't talk about the ones that didn't quite go the way you'd like. But we took the case knowing they weren't going to go the way we like. We're starting to contain the damage. Sometimes that's part of the leadership strategy you put in. Well, I'll take it. We're not going to necessarily win this, but we can maybe cabin it. And so the school prayer issues with students is great. With school officials, much more difficult.
But the school
city councils, though, no problem. Town of Greece. They let it go. So it's. It's just, it's adults versus kids. There's a whole series of dynamics on that.
And so when it comes down to it, there are some clear lines.
Yeah, there really are.
But when you start working those out,
the blur line becomes like this coach. I mean, I think this coach should have the right to pray with his kids. I mean, they're leading the prayer. It's their event. He's just showing up. The other side's going to argue, well, may not. He's showing up, and that's why the kids are coming. So that's what they're going to argue. But I think at the end of the day, I'm glad he's being defended. But it doesn't mean it's an easy case. No such thing as an easy religion case involving schools.
So, Jay, Christmas is about to roll around.
Nativity time.
Yes, nativity, Christmas trees.
So, if you've got enough Santa Claus, enough reindeer, enough candy canes and menorah, a creche is okay, a nativity scene's okay. If it's just the nativity scene, usually not. It's like a landscaping test.
On public property.
Of course, on church property, you do whatever you want. Private property, you do whatever you want. But even on the nativity scene cases, most towns understand now you make it a broader-based environment that having the nativity is not a violation.
Jay, in all of our legal systems, you find scriptures in halls of justice everywhere, going back to our origins.
Yeah.
Do you think that it was ever intended that we become the other direction, where we're taking down the Ten Commandments out of the Oklahoma City?
Yeah, I mean, I argued a Ten Commandments case at the Supreme Court and actually won unanimously, and I pointed the court to the frieze of the courtroom, which actually has a depiction of Moses holding the Ten Commandments with the words in Hebrew. Yeah. I mean, so this idea, the interesting thing with the Oklahoma case was I think it was a knee-jerk reaction. I think that there were other ways to handle it, but the same day the Supreme Court said a Ten Commandment monument was okay in Texas, they said it was not okay in Kentucky. So the court is very conflicted on this. Now, I had one in Utah, and we won it unanimously. But there, a group was trying to come in and put up the 7 aphorisms, kind of the anti-Ten Commandments. And the government said, no, wait a minute, we have this it's part of our history, because the pioneer community in Utah, this is part of our history. And we were able to convince 9 justices that that's the way it should be, as it is in their courtroom. So it really depends on, again, it's kind of the architecture test. What else is around it? And that makes a difference. The great law, what they'll say in the Supreme Court, it's got all the great lawgivers. Maimonides, Hammurabi, Muhammad. I mean, they've got them all there depicted, and Moses as well. So that's how they justify the Ten Commandments, multiple displays of the Ten Commandments at the Supreme Court.
Jay, something I want to get into at the conference. We don't have time to do it here. Back to the zoning type issues, and I think it's something that we're going to see at ground level more and more.
Sure.
As we're and certainly we've dealt with it in Dallas, and I know a number of our churches that are part of C3 Global have where the city's telling the church what kind of signs they can put up, how long they can
grant the
post
tax
them.
exemptions.
Exactly.
State property tax or local top property taxes. Yeah, that's a big issue.
And I think it's a bit case sensitive.
Yeah, sure.
But I think there are some principles out there that we can talk about.
That's the kind of thing we'll get into, because I think that affects church growth.
It does.
Also affects community relations in the community. So there's multiple. You got to kind of wear multiple hats when you do it, and look at it in multiple venues.
But what I have to ask you while I'm here with you. As a lawyer that's never walked into the Supreme Court, that is the ultimate. Just give us an idea. What is it like to walk in there and argue a case?
I just took the picture of your picture out there, so sent it to my oldest son, who's an attorney.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, I just wanted him to see that.
Well, I've argued 12. We've done about 20, but I've argued 12 of them, and because we've had a bunch of summary reversals. Probably I've had 8 summary reversals over the years, where you brief it, but they just reverse it, and that's great. That's a nice, and it doesn't happen often, but we've had a number. We've had more than our share. Look, it doesn't get old. I'm cautious with what I take. You know that. You've known me a long time. So, but look, I'm the grandson of a Russian immigrant. My grandfather came to the United States in 1914 through Ellis Island. He was a fruit peddler in Brooklyn, New York, and his grandson gets to argue cases at the Supreme Court of the United States. Wow. It's a pretty good deal. Okay. And I've got a grandson now, and I've got 2 granddaughters on the way, twins coming soon. And it's a country worth fighting for. When you get in that Supreme Court of the United States, look, for a lawyer, it's the penultimate. Yeah. But, you develop a relationship. Again, it's a relationship based, and there's a level of trust. Even the justices that may not agree with you, there's a level of trust that you're going to at least shoot it straight, and that's what we try to do. Our briefs have been, we've had, like I said, we had about 20 cases, but we've had a lot of our briefs cited in Supreme Court opinions by Democrats and Republicans, or left and right, if you want to call it that way, at the Supreme. I've had a brief cited by Justice Stevens. I had a brief cited by Chief Justice Roberts. I mean, so it's an incredible experience. It's an unbelievable, humbling honor. I'm cautious with what I take up. I'm not running up. If I win a case below, I'm not running to take it up there. That's for sure. I'm usually fighting like the dickens for them not to hear it. It's been unpredictable. Court's always been a bit unpredictable.
A lot of people realize this, maybe some don't.
Yeah.
The Supreme Court doesn't have to take a case.
They only take about 80. When you and I started practicing, they were taking about 110. Now they're taking like 80, 82. So they take very few cases. The oral argument's only 30 minutes each side. Very rarely is it extended. And it's, and then you got the briefing. And that 30, I cannot describe what it's like. Well, I could describe it this way. I had one case where it was divided argument, so I had about 15 minutes. I had 22 questions. Do the math on that. About every 40 seconds. Just.
So your
it was
little
interesting because
speech
the segment before, the argument before mine that was part of the same case, but their issue, they had like no questions in 20 minutes. I had 10 or 15 minutes. I had 22 questions. It was nonstop. So I generally go about 35 seconds. And then
and you have this beautiful argument that's laid out
you
that you're
have an
prepared
argument,
to give.
But you know what the truth of the matter is? No matter what they ask me, they're getting one of three things. I have my theme, and no matter what they ask, you get back to the theme. Much like a sermon.
Yeah,
get
it is.
back to the point.
Get to the point.
So they could ask you this, but you bring it back in, and you prepare for anything. I prepare for everything. I mean, it's months and months of preparation for that 30 minutes. But there's also hundreds of pages of briefs have been filed, thousands in some cases. And, I mean, all of it's important. But it's an unbelievable experience.
How old were you when you argued your first one before the
32. I was a child.
Goodness.
Yeah.
Jay,
It was a long time ago.
That's
Yeah,
amazing.
so almost 30 years ago.
That was about when you and I first met, somewhere back in those
late
days.
80s. So I had they come in clumps. So I had a clump in the 80s, I had a clump in the 90s, clump in the early 2000s. Last one was 2010. We won it. We had a whole series of them last year with the Affordable Care Act cases. We won those. We had won most of ours below, and the Department of Justice took them up, and the court denied review after the Hobby Lobby cases came out a couple of years ago. So we've had a good run. I'm not complaining. I mean, you don't win every case, and that's just not the way it is. I mean, you don't. And some you think you're going to win, you don't, and some you think. I mean, I had one oral argument. I think the best oral argument I ever gave, we lost. I thought it was my best argument. We lost 6-3. I had another one where I got yelled at for an hour, and we won 9-0. So, you can't. It doesn't. It's very not predictable. Yeah.
They sound like sermons.
They are. Yeah. With a different print. They come out, but then someone is pining on your sermon, so it's a little bit different. But anyway, but it's a great
You have a
experience.
couple little fights going on with the Internal Revenue Service.
You may remember this, but that was my first job out of law school. As my wife reminds me, 250 years ago, Pam says, I was on Fox when those cases first broke, and I said, well, I was in the Office of Chief Counsel of IRS, which I was. My first job out of law school was as a trial lawyer with the IRS. And when I got home, Pam said, that was a long time ago. Things might have changed in 35 years. And apparently they have, because they had Now, I will tell you this. We've gotten, out of the 41 clients now, 39 have had exemptions since we filed the lawsuit.
Wow, that's
So
great.
it took that. And then there's 2 which have not been denied nor granted, that we're trying to figure out why the government's just not responding. So we're in federal court with them still. We had a good decision in this Z Street case, which was a pro-Israel case that was also targeted, and good result there. I'm sure by February I'll have more information on that. And that's a good I'm going to use that actually at the conference as an example of kind of what I call the 3 R's of this, which is, you got to resist when there's wrong.
Yeah.
You got and that's it. Look, resistance is never easy. You got to also realize in the resisting process, you resist it, you want to reform it. So now the IRS, I think, is beyond self-correction. I think that ship has sailed. I think you got to start over. And then at the end of the day, what you want to do is restore a constitutional republic. So I'm going to get into that at the conference.
That's
and one of the
huge.
things I'll hit. Yeah,
That's huge.
but I think it also applies to the church. What's the church's job? Well, is restoration and reformation.
Right.
I mean, this is what we do:
Right.
resisting evil, restoring, and reforming. That's what we do, and that's the job as believers. And I mean, I don't care if it's in a courtroom, if it's a corporate advice to a corporate client, or if it's in a church's goal. Resist the evil, reform, and restore. That's what we should be in business of doing.
That's good.
So
Well,
we'll
we're-
hit that at length.
That's
And
exciting.
my book's coming out on paperback that very week, I think.
Really?
Undemocratic is coming out in paperback.
I want to.
Where you'll be able to download the song for free. But if you're there at the conference, you'll be able to hear us do it, and I'll give you the CD. If people still do CDs.
Can't be any better than that.
Yeah, I think we're probably run. We're hitting our
43 minutes.
Yeah, so we're gonna run out of Facebook time in a minute here. They call it pretty quick here. So any last?
But I think that bringing the practical applications that so that we can take what's legal.
Yep.
You can do that for us.
Yep.
And then show us how that becomes very practical.
Right.
And then the other thing is, what can we do to deal with this thing of the rise of anti-Semitism and the rise of anti-Christianity globally?
Yeah.
At the same time, in some of the places where the oppression is so great,
right,
the church is exploding.
Yeah.
So can you?
We'll get into that. I'm going to get into that at the conference because the rise of anti-Semitism is in. I was in England this summer. You cannot imagine.
Oh,
it's like pre-Nazi Germany. Not institutionally that way. I mean, you don't have the government doing it, but this kind of anti-Israel, anti-Jewish bias is scary. And I mean, you had Netanyahu say a couple months back, when the Jews were killed in the terrorist attack in the Jewish grocery store, come to Israel. I mean, that's why you got, it's not just Israel's right to exist. It's Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state.
Yeah.
And that's, I'm going to get into that. And part of our mission right now is also informing younger evangelicals that have this, the Palestinians have been downtrodden. It's to really explain the situation to them. I've represented Palestinian Christians, a lot of them, including the wife of a bookstore operator who was murdered by Hamas in broad daylight and got her out of Gaza into Israel. And I'm going to explain that. So, I tell people, don't lecture me on the plight of the Palestinian Christians. I get it. I represent them.
Yeah.
So we'll have plenty of time to get in all that and look forward to it at the conference.
The terrorists have no respect, do they?
Well, no, I say the difference. Someone asked me the other day, Claude, what the difference was, and there are Muslim reformers. There are not many, but I mean, not many vocal, but there are some. But they said, well, your typical Islamic moderate versus the jihadists. I said the difference: patience. Same goal, patience. Now the real reformers, the Zuhdi Jassers of the world, and these guys, well, they're really trying to reform from within. But Lord Sachs, who was the chief rabbi of England, said that the religious conflict we're looking at right now is interreligious, not necessarily just Jews against Muslims or Muslims against Jews. It's also the war within Islam itself. And that's fueling a lot of this. But we're going to have plenty of time to talk about this at the conference. We don't want to give them everything.
No. We want them to come to get seated.
I do want to know, I should ask this, but I don't know if anybody's commenting, but you've seen us on Facebook a lot since, say, Friday. Friday was in San Francisco. I gave a report outside of the court. I was in your town, Dallas, on Saturday, did a speech in front of hundreds of people, but gave about 10 minutes on Facebook. Then you had last night we were on radio. Yesterday afternoon we did our radio live, which we do every day on Facebook. Then we did the band last night, and now today. So and radio today. So you may be like Facebooked out. They give you like a Facebook breather. But no, it's great. We're thrilled we're able to do this and encourage people again. Go to c3conference.com.
Yeah, let me just say on behalf of Ed Young, our senior pastor and the founder, let me just say thank you for doing this, and thank you for coming to being our guest at the conference. I know you and Denny have been friends for a long time.
Good friends for a long time.
It's been a long time coming. We're very excited.
Yeah, looking forward to being with you all in Dallas, February 10th and 11th, and the band will be there. All right, everybody.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.